Please join me now for a short excerpt from High Tide. The story opens with Rick Maddigan trudging through the middle of the swamp in the middle of the night in the middle of a winter storm. Mobster muscled into the muck of Jersey Shore wetlands in the middle of the night. Seaport College Business Professor of the Year Rick Maddigan treks headlong into approaching storm gusts and freezing drizzle. He searches. JP's words keep creeping in. I wish you wouldn't be doing this, Rick. It scares me that something worse will come of it. They're just using you, you know. He remembers her eyes welling with tears. Kitchen clock ticks filled the room. She stood motionless. I know, he said. She wrapped her arms across her chest and spun defiantly sideways to stare out the window. Her boyish figure silhouetted against the reflection. He inched toward the door. You're right about what you said, Green Eyes, but I have to do this, he begged, hands outstretched, raising one eyebrow. Don't you get that? Almost imperceptibly, she nodded. Slam ordered him to find and deliver a quarter-size computer chip that's embedded in a dead, plastic-bagged, 100-pound loggerhead turtle. The corpse, Slam said, is cinder block anchored in the mud somewhere in the vast outreaches of the freezing low-tide coastal swamp. Look at this mess I'm in. I did it to myself. Am I ever going to learn to keep my big mouth shut? He thumped his gloves together. Stress. He visualized the dazed Cheshire Cat smiling delivery guys leaning down into a sample line of coke, examining the ounce of dope for seeds and twigs, eyes scanning the parking lot. Folded cash fanned and pocketed in a blink, smoked car windows slithering closed, departing slowly while checking rearview mirrors, exhaling. By the time Maddigan finally figured out that the little Ziplocs of marijuana were coming from a mob member who now knew that the buyer was a professor, it was too late. He'd already said too much. Near blinded by the heavy drizzle and no chance of stars night, Maddigan stops to rest. To locate the creature's body, Slam said to align himself with some vaguely calibrated point across the bay, opposite the distant fog and wreathed Atlantic City skyline, which he can now scarcely see, and to count steps. He's been counting. He starts up again. Ocean-driven bayfront waves slap the shoreline to his left. He slogs his way through the easternmost sprawl of this desolate expanse of gook, his tracks flooding with sucking sounds almost as fast as he lifts each foot. 1,108 steps, 1,109. Marshlands choke off the jutting pothole dirt and blacktop patchwork that locals call Seven Bridges Road. It spans the full length of the narrow 7-long-mile peninsula. He remembers her fine, straight, shoulder-length black hair tucked securely behind her elfish ears, her trademark dimple fully dissolved. Clamped, clenched jaw. It was a look he'd seen before, just a gasping breath or two from streaming tears. It was clear that his failure to follow her intuition created for her a sense of betrayal. He hated this. Why wouldn't she just accept that he was doing this for her? That's why, he said, that's why they've got me trapped with this blackmail thing. And I can't risk them drawing you into it now, too. He gestured dismissively, his voice trailing off. Look, I love you, damn it. He stepped away, closed the door quietly behind him. The door jamb click followed him to the driveway. Biting, blustery drizzle, his eyes a squint, dizzy, cold sweat, his pulse a drumbeat, he surges on across blankets of ice-slick reeds, scruffy clumps of seaweed, and crackling wafer-thin slivers of frozen tidewater leavings. The cold, dark silence rings in his ears like some distant alarm. It's a shrill, steady buzz that swallows whole the shoreline sounds and faraway roar of ocean waves. Muck slithers through the last unclogged treads of his mud-caked boots. His breath blurting a diminishing trail of puffs above and behind his head is absorbed into the billowing wall of fog. From far across the bay, muffled blurs of light brushstroke the visual cacophony of rooftop skyline the size of a book of spent match heads from this distance. Somewhere ahead, somewhere in the ebb-tide mud, lays the heavily shelled object of his mission. 1135. 1136, 1100.